Your phone buzzes at 9:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you already know, before you even look, that it's going to be one of three things: a bill, a question about money, or silence, the kind that comes after someone decides not to ask you for something because they already know what it'll cost them to ask. It's the second one. Your cousin needs $800 for a car repair, and he's already typing the apology before the actual ask, the way everyone in your family does now. You'll send it within the hour. You always do. What you don't know yet, sitting on your couch with your thumb hovering over the transfer button, is that this exact moment, this small, unremarkable Tuesday, is the one you'll think back on years from now as the night you finally understood what nobody warns you about when you become the rich one in a family that isn't. Let's go back, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. You grew up in the same house as everyone else who's calling you tonight. Same kitchen table, same arguments about money at the end of every month, same envelope system your mother used to ration the grocery budget into 4 labeled piles that never quite lasted the full week. Nobody in your family had money. That wasn't a tragedy exactly. It was just the water everyone swam in, the thing that made certain conversations unnecessary because everyone already understood the rules without saying them out loud. Then something changed. Maybe it was a job that paid more than anyone in 3 generations of your family had ever made in a year. Maybe it was a business that actually worked after the 2 that didn't. Maybe it was simpler than that. You just made different choices at 22 than the people around you made, paid attention to compound interest the way your aunt paid attention to her soap operas, religiously, without missing an episode. Whatever it was, somewhere in your 30s, you looked at a number in an account and realized you had crossed the line nobody in your bloodline had ever crossed before. You were, by a wide and uncomfortable margin, the richest person your family had ever produced. Here's the part nobody tells you happens next, the part that should be obvious but somehow isn't until you're living inside it. The love doesn't change. The math does. Researchers who study what they call cross-class siblings, people who grew up in the same household but ended up on opposite sides of a widening financial gap, have spent years interviewing families exactly like yours, and what they keep finding is almost identical every time. The gap itself isn't the thing that breaks relationships. It's what the gap quietly does to how people read each other. Your brother doesn't actually believe you owe him money, but every time you show up to dinner in a car that costs more than his yearly salary, some small involuntary part of his brain runs the same comparison it ran the time before, and the time before that, and he hates that part of his brain a little more each time it fires. You notice it first in small ways. The way conversations about your job get shorter. The way nobody asks how work is going anymore. Not because they don't care, but because the honest answer involves numbers that make the room go quiet in a way that feels almost like grief. You learn to give vague answers. It's going well. Busy, you know how it is. You start editing yourself in real time, the way you'd edit a sentence you knew was about to land wrong, except you're doing it constantly. Every conversation, every family group chat, every holiday dinner. You think it'll get easier. It doesn't. It gets quieter, which is a different thing entirely. Family wealth researchers have a phrase for what happens inside families once one person crosses far enough ahead of the others, a fear of disrupting family harmony that leads almost universally to a complete lack of transparency. Not lying exactly, just everyone on every side deciding silently that certain truths are too expensive to say out loud. Your parents stop telling you when money is tight because they don't want you to feel obligated. You stop telling them what you actually earn because you don't want them to feel like they failed somehow, raising someone who needed this much to feel secure. Everyone is protecting everyone else from a conversation that, ironically, would probably bring you all closer if anyone had the nerve to actually have it. And then there's the asking. You don't see it coming the first few times. A small loan here, framed as temporary. A larger one there, never explicitly framed as anything, just understood. You give because you can, and because saying no to family feels like a betrayal of something older and more sacred than money. But here's the part that catches you off guard, the part that takes years to fully name. Every time you give, the relationship shifts slightly, almost imperceptibly, from sibling to creditor, from cousin to safety net. You didn't ask for that role. Nobody handed you a contract. It just happened, transaction by transaction, until one day you realize people in your family relate to your bank account before they relate to you. Researchers studying ultra-wealthy families found something that, at first, sounds like it shouldn't apply to you, because you're not flying on private planes or running a family office. But the core mechanism is identical, regardless of scale. Younger or less wealthy family members start quietly asking themselves a version of the same question. Does this person actually want to be around me, or am I just useful? And the wealthier person, you, starts asking the mirror version of that question without realizing it. Do they love me, or do they love what I can do for them? Once that question enters a relationship, even unspoken, even denied, it doesn't fully leave. It just sits underneath every interaction afterward, a low hum nobody mentions but everyone can hear. You remember the exact dinner when you first felt it clearly. A cousin's wedding, 18 months ago. You picked up part of the catering bill without being asked because you could, because it felt like the kind of thing a person who loves their family does. 3 weeks later, you found out, through someone else, that the family had spent the rest of that evening discussing exactly how much you'd paid, debating whether it was generous or whether it was a way of making everyone feel small. You hadn't been trying to make anyone feel small. You'd been trying to help. The gap between your intention and how it landed was the first time you understood, fully, that money doesn't just buy things. It rewrites how every gesture gets interpreted, whether you want it to or not. What almost nobody tells you, sitting where you're sitting now, is the specific shape of the loneliness that follows. It isn't the loneliness of being excluded. People still invite you to everything. It's the loneliness of being included for reasons you can never fully verify. You'll spend dinners wondering if the laughter at your jokes is real or polite. You'll catch yourself mid-conversation, calculating whether someone is actually interested in your week or just positioning toward a future ask. You hate that you do this. You do it anyway, because the data inside your own family, collected over years of real interactions, has trained you to. Tonight, on your couch, you send your cousin the $800. You don't resent it. You've stopped pretending the resentment isn't sometimes there, in small flickers, and you've also stopped pretending that resentment cancels out the love, because both things, somehow, are completely true at once. You think about your mother's old envelope system, the one that rationed the grocery money into 4 piles every month, and you realize, with a strange kind of tenderness, that you've built your own version of that system now, except instead of envelopes, you have a mental ledger of who you can help without it changing how they look at you, and who you've already helped too many times for either of you to pretend the math isn't there. You put the phone down. The money's already gone, already turned into something useful for someone you love. You sit in the quiet that follows, the specific quiet that belongs only to people who have more than the family that raised them, and you understand, maybe for the first time fully, that the hardest part of being the richest person in your family was never the money leaving your account. It was learning to live inside a love you can no longer fully separate from what you can give it.